The Dark Ages, a period of European history spanning from the 5th to the 15th century, is often characterized by its lack of written records and its association with war, famine, and disease. Despite this, there are still many fascinating and often gruesome stories from this time that have been passed down through oral tradition or recorded in historical accounts. Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we'll be looking at 7 true stories from the Dark Ages. Yeah, you heard it right. A decapitated saint and a talking head. According to Aelfric of Eynsham, Lives of the Saints, when the Vikings were assaulting England in the 9th century, a saint named Edmund surrendered himself to the invaders rather than see his people overwhelmed. In the 10th and 11th century, Aelfric was an English abbot who composed hagiographies, homilies, and biblical commentaries. Edmund attempted to convert the Viking invaders. In response, he was tortured, decapitated, and his skull was thrown into the forest. In anticipation of the resurrection of the dead at the Last Judgment, contemporary Christian burial practices stipulated that the head must be interred with the body. A witness who had witnessed the beheading knew where to seek, so a search party traveled through the woods, yelling for Edmund, and ultimately heard his head say, "Hear, hear." A forgotten saint haunts a blacksmith's dreams. Aelfric wrote about Swithin, an additional saint whose burial had been forgotten by his people. To assure his reverence and remembrance, Swithin initially appeared in a vision to a local blacksmith, instructing him on the location of his burial and how to identify it as his. He explained that there is an iron ring on the coffin's lid, and if the ring can be opened, then all of this has been real. However, the blacksmith was too terrified to follow through, and Swithin had to visit him 3 times before the smith ultimately went to his grave. Political upheaval in the local church prohibited the transfer of Swithin's body into the church, so his spirit went a different route. He began to appear to members of the village, asking the sick to visit his tomb in order to be healed. The monarch eventually observes the healings and instructs the bishop to re-enter Swithin's body within the church. A biblical king, a witch, and a seance. Aelfric also authored a sermon addressing the issue of consulting auguries and omens. The canonical Old Testament account of King Saul's encounter with the Witch of Endor is included. In the biblical account, the king requests that a medium summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who upon being disturbed becomes infuriated with Saul and tells him that he and his entire army would perish the following day. Both prophecies are fulfilled, the army is defeated in battle, and Saul takes his own life. A dead baker who throws rocks at villagers. Near the end of the Middle Ages in the 15th century, a story circulated about a baker in Brittany who after his death continuously came back to life, much to the chagrin of his village. According to Ghosts in the Middle Ages, The Living and Dead in Medieval Society by Jean-Claude Schmitt, on the baker's first resurrection, he returns home, where he attempts to help his family knead bread dough, but instead scares them away. After the neighbors chase him away, the baker returns, throwing rocks at villagers and generally wreaking havoc. Some notice his legs appear to be covered with mud up to his thighs. When a group of locals dig up his body to make sure he was properly buried, they find his corpse is muddied up in the exact same way. The determined ghost of a vengeful father. The Eyrbyggja saga, or the saga of the people of Eyri, is an Icelandic family saga that details various hauntings in medieval Iceland, where the walking dead, known as Draugr in Old Norse, occasionally return with malevolent intent. One of the stories involves a guy named Arnkell and his father, Thorolf Haltfoot, who died with their eyes open while seated at a family dining table. Arnkell told his family not to walk in front of the man's line of sight. He hid the face in order for a hole to be created in the wall so that Thorolf could be carried out, possibly to confuse the corpse in the event that the undead Thorolf attempted to return home. Lessons on hospitality from a Scottish woman's ghost. In another Eyrbyggja saga story, a Christian woman from the Hebrides named Thorgunna died, leaving a few gifts to the church in exchange for prayers for her soul. As her body was transported for burial, the movers stopped for the night at a farm, where they were refused food, which was against the social customs of the day. As the movers prepared to go to sleep hungry, they heard a rustling noise in the kitchen. It was the ghost of Thorgunna, completely naked, preparing a meal for the men. The farmers who had originally refused hospitality to the group were scared and subsequently promised them food, dry clothing, and whatever else they needed for their journey. Thorgunna was soon buried, and her ghost never bothered anyone after that. A servant wrestles with an undead farmer. Another Icelandic saga, the Laxdæla saga, meaning the saga of the people of Laxardal, was written in the 13th century and tells the story of a violent man named Hrab, who, on his deathbed, requested to be buried vertically in the doorway of his home so that he could keep an eye on his family and his house. According to the saga, Robb became a Draugr and walked again a great deal after he was dead, killing most of his servants in their encounters. They eventually relocated his body, but it didn't take, and the farm was abandoned. When a man named Olaf later took over the property, one of his servants came to him, terrified, saying that Robb wouldn't leave the threshold of his former home and that the servant had physically wrestled with him, trying to remove it. So that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell icon so that you never miss our upcoming videos. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section down below. Stay tuned, and we'll catch you in the next video.